right. I just wanted to welcome everybody here today for the RAS Step Up Your Safety Series webinar. I'm the moderator. My name is Therese Schulte. I'm also joined by Susan Leon. She is one of our loss control consultants, and she is going to do the presentation on burn injury prevention. As we get started, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping. You all should have been able to enter on your phones and your computer, but you will be muted. If you do have any questions that you have come up, please be aware that we just ask that you use the Q&A feature to type your questions in, and then as time allows at the end, we will try to get those answered. And as of that, I am going to let Susan start.
Well, thank you, Therese, and welcome everybody. I appreciate you hopping on and listening to the new sessions of our Step Up series for 2026. So we're starting off with burn injury prevention. Like Therese said, I am the loss control consultant. I cover Wisconsin. And been with RAS for almost 2 years now, but in the industry for about 25. So a couple things that we can go over. If you have questions, please feel free, like she said, use the Q&A. We're going to just kind of go over high level of the couple things to cover. So we're going to start with just moving right in here because I know everybody's time are busy. So there we go. First, this the top thing is identifying the hazards. That's going to be the first thing. We're going to a couple different ways to do that. And then second, we're going to go what to do when you have a burn injury and then also how to treat. So it's basically the agenda that we had put together for today. And starting with identifying burn hazards in the workplace, first we got to figure out what types there are. What exposures do you have? So the first one, thermal burns caused by hot liquids, hot surfaces, open flames, chemical burns, more of your corrosive, acidic, all your cleaners. So depending on what industry, these could be in anywhere from equipment to the cleaning products to also chemical, electrical burns. And then also something that maybe people didn't think of was the UV sun exposures that people have working outside and so forth. So just a couple things to think about that you probably didn't maybe assess and review on work hazards. So starting to just to the first way is basically conducting a hazard assessment, doing a walkthrough, identifying the equipment that you have, what could cause an injury. Would be the equipment. If you have grills in your kitchen and nutrition areas, do you have liquids and dishwashers, that kind of thing. All your exposures, making a list of those hazards, and then identifying that do we have everything in place, which we will get to later from a PPE and safety perspective. Other ones would be open flames and then also spark producing tools like welding in your maintenance areas and so forth. This could be for any industry that you have all of these exposures. So working with your loss control consultant, we can narrow this down and work in specific areas to kind of focus and hone in on what the major exposures are, and then figure out if we have everything in place to prevent the injuries, first of all, and then second, to make sure we have everything in place if there would be an event of a burn. A couple other things are corrosive, they're your cleaners, the electrical exposure. Some people just manage this by having everything hired out and no electrical exposures inside. So there's ways to mitigate your exposures to the electrical hazards. And then finally, then your outdoor workstations, doing and construction, landscaping, the just making sure we're maintaining our properties and so forth. So, and then going into if you assessed everything, you walk through the areas, we've kind of identified things, maybe not giving a big picture. This is another way to do that. Going in through analyzing historical data, taking like your near misses, your incident only records that you kind of reported in and no injury was reported, but just kind of make note of what happened. Was there a burn? Was there a splash injury? Was there hot surface touch type of thing that caused a potential injury, but didn't really have a medical treatment for that? So this is a good ways to analyze the data and we have those incident only reports on our portal to use, or you can reach out to your loss control consultant. We can kind of assess the bigger picture of things as well. And another way is just evaluating your environment conditions, observing just the placement of where everything is. I've gone through ergonomically, going through like your kitchens, how things are set up, Or when you're boiling your water, is the drain right below the piece of equipment, or is it across the way? And we need to assess how things are set up so the exposure's reduced or eliminated from there. Steam from working areas, from equipment, working on your lawnmowers and so forth, touching hot surfaces as they're coming in for repair and so forth. So just those things we might not think about right away, but they are definitely exposures, as well as flammable materials. If you're doing a welding project in your maintenance area and so forth, it's just kind of nice to know, like, okay, where we're going to go, how can we make sure we contain the exposures and go from there. The one thing I did find very interesting was this high water temperatures. Now, I actually thought this was interesting and went upstairs to my kitchen and tested the hot water in the kitchen. So not just commercially, but personally, I went and did, and our hot water was about almost 140 degrees. So I'm thinking, personally, I need to turn my hot water heater down. So um, this is also good for observing in your homes as well as in your workplaces too. Another way to identify the hazards is to interview employees. Maybe in their role, they've come across things, they've been there for a while. What type of tasks are they doing that they feel hazardous? Or if they had a certain tool, could it reduce the hazard that they're coming across with? And then what hot surfaces do they encounter? Does the role require any PPE to protect them from certain hazards? Or is it just that, nope, we've identified this is the risk assessment. There's nothing in this role, there's nothing in this department. We've eliminated or reduced the exposures that are there. So it's just another way besides doing a walkthrough, a work hazard assessment, interviewing employees to find out hazards that are there, as well as then just going and comparing what you have for exposures and then what you have for preventative measures or the resources after an event would happen. So if you're missing something, that's definitely a hazard. As an example, like eye wash stations, I've seen them in certain areas. Sometimes they're the bottles, sometimes they're the actual stations, but sometimes they're expired, I'd have to say. I mean, they're there, they're usable, sometimes they're dusty. I have one example that I've done with schools or buildings and stuff like that, going to an eye wash station and just sticking your head in there. Would you stick your head in there when you don't have an injury? Because when you do have an injury, is it dirty enough that you really don't want to stick your face in there and get your eyes washed out and so forth? So, just something to think about when we're doing your walkthroughs or your assessments of your facilities. The other uh, condition is to make sure you have your hot work permits in place when you're welding in certain areas, um, and making sure you have somebody to monitor those. The next thing is just PPE. What hazards do you have? Like we talked about, identifying that are there in your workplace, and then what PPE is needed to mitigate and reduce the exposures of potential injuries. And then finally, the sun exposures that we kind of talked about. Do we have a space for them to get shade after a while? Or we have proper clothing, wearing sunscreen, wearing hats, just all those things to reduce the exposures of a sunburn, which it is about 50 some degrees right now. So I think we're getting there to spring, but I know Mother Nature is changing her mind. So we're almost there. Here's just some interesting statistics from American Burn Association that I found. Um, there's a 97.7% survival rate for burns these days, which probably was not the case 20, 30 years ago. So kudos to everything that's been progressing so far. The other thing I noticed was kind of interesting was the top common cause was flash and flame burns. So it's either from your electrical work and so forth. What I did notice was these numbers did not equal 100. It was 130. So I'd like to figure out how we came across some of the numbers from the American Burn Association, which I can dive into for later, but it was just kind of interesting. Like this is the number one cause. The second cause is the scalding burns. So from your hot water and so forth. And then it drops all the way down to only 10% of your contact burns. You're touching hot surfaces, metals, and so forth. So there's a big drop from those two. But and then chemical burns as well, which is a big one, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. And then moving on to what to do. So what to do in your workplace? First, make sure if the burn is severe, you have ensure the entire area is safe. I don't know if anybody has a first responder process in your facilities, or if it's you have a burn or severe injury, you just dial 911. Making sure we have that foundation of what processes we have in place and that everybody knows what to do is key. But then making sure we ensure the area is clear for a burn and then stopping the burn in the process, which doing by cooling the burn, don't not ice packs, and I think we'll go into more details later, but just making sure we have the right resources to help with the exposures that we have. Chemical burns, flushing immediately. That's we're going to talk a little more on the SDS, which we'll go into in a little bit. This is key, and this is very big with OSHA right now with the SDS, making sure that they're up to date and where to go to if it is a flush or if it's just make sure you leave the exposure depending on what chemical or the burn type exposure, and then covering the burn and so forth, and then reporting the incident correctly. So, first aids, what not to do and what to do. So, apply ice. It can worsen the damage, just like we said, a cool cloth, and that later. But I remember hearing this from my grandma use butter, oils, ointments on a burn. It'll help, it'll heal it faster. But again, they trap the heat. So, things have evolved. We've gotten better, we've gotten more education um, and how to help with these types of injuries. Of course, do not break the blisters. And then just delaying medical care, making sure you get seek treatment right away. So, what to do? Stopping the burn process, removing the heat source, removing any clothing that you can, and then, of course, cooling the area gently with cool water, not cold water or ice water. And then monitoring the signs of infection for redness, swelling, and then any pus that could happen. And then, of course, contacting your health provider or seeking treatment, of course, right away, dialing 911, EMT, so forth. But here, getting into your SDS, you're reviewing your chemical inventory. This is going to be very big. I know that OSHA is definitely on one of their initiatives for this year, I believe. So making sure you have your documentation all up to date. That is one of the big things. All of the SDS are all the same format now. So making sure you have those for every chemical and every process that you have in cleaner in your facility. Um, and if you have it online or if you have it in printed copy, it doesn't matter either way, but just make sure everybody has access to those. If it's online, everybody needs to be able to get to that immediately and no delay. Um, and then, of course, looking at the SDS, if it's a corrosive, if it's can irritate certain things, the reactive heat release, and then the PPE requirements for that chemical. The big thing is section 4, and I think that's my next slide too. Yes. So here's just a quick guide from OSHA that I found. Really quick tool, do some safety training, and we could probably talk about this for a half an hour itself. Just going what you need to do, how you need to document, how, keep track of everything, but identifying the products, making sure staff know where to go to look for what you need to do for a remedy. So your first aid measures are right here on section 4, and that'll be consistent with all the new SDS sheets. So looking for that immediately, making sure if you do a training that all the staff can say, yep, it's in section 4, here it is, and that's what I need to do. Do we need to flush the product? Do we need to just leave it be and, just seek treatment, that kind of thing? It'll be right there. The older SDS formats were all over the place. You'd have to do some searching and finding and stuff like that, but now they're all consistent moving forward. So that's helpful. And of course, training makes it a little bit easier too for staff. So, and then finally, just going into how to treat. This is first aid for the most part. And then anything after that, you're probably going to contact 911 and so forth and make sure everything's taken care of properly. Looking for potential dangers, like we talked about before, doing a hazard assessment, doing a walkthrough, seeing what potential exposures we have. But then when we have treatment, making sure that there's no other potential dangers, that people can go to the individual, help them, and not cause any other issues with treating. If there's any ongoing fires, make sure you take care of those, and then reduce any hazardous materials that are around the area, and then proper PPE. So then addressing, then secondly, attention, making sure you notify medical staff and contact the authorities, and then post That's what your treatment of with them and with the injured employee, and then also then kind of going back to it, figure out what happened, what caused it, and then see if we need to make any changes and any preventative measures too, so it doesn't happen again. So safety tips to prevent burns in the workplace. Basically storing your chemicals safely, ensure proper ventilation, depending how much you have. That is a big one with OSHA right now. If there's over 25 gallons, you need to make sure you have a fire protective cabinet. Um, if anything under that, you got to make sure, do you need it? Or if you don't need it, then remove it. So you reduce the quantities of what you have in your facilities. And also just conducting safety routines and checks around the facility, making sure you have enough PPE to cover what exposures you have in your facility. So if something does happen, you are ready to take care of it. And of course, installing safety devices, which is your PPE, your eye wash stations, your first aid kits, make sure that they are accessible. And then, of course, practicing your emergency process. Who do you need to call? Who's in a group? Do we have a committee or a first responder team for your facility to handle certain injuries and so forth? And then, of course, just promoting good housekeeping, less trip hazards, less potential to cause other things, and trips and burns and stuff like that. It's all together and it's all related for that part. This is a big part of it. We kind of talked about the hazard assessment and walking through preventative measures, making sure everybody's trained on what we need to do in the event there is a fire. Where should we go? Who should we talk to? Just procedures in place so it's second nature. We don't guess at the time of a fire. We want to make sure we have the information and it's all readily available. We have our response protocols. There's no questions. Um, and also conducting fire drills. That's very key for larger locations, larger amount of employees, just to make sure everybody knows their spot to go to in the event of a fire, and make sure everybody's accountable for that. So that's what we're looking for. And of course, emergency kit. For burns, there's really nothing that we found specifically, or like even a first aid kit. OSHA doesn't really say you need this, this, and this. It's based on what hazards do you have, and then that's the PPE that you need to provide in the first aid kit and so forth. The physical hazards, just making sure when we do the hazard assessment, what are we looking for? Is it physical or is there health related exposures in certain departments or certain areas? Some things that people just don't think of because you're there every day. It's always nice to have maybe a third eye come through the facility and check things out. Like, well, I think this is fine, but what are your thoughts? Just kind of brainstorm, making sure that we're set up to be successful and reduce exposures as much as we can. And then, of course, overexposure of harmful dust, chemicals, and then radiation. These are just everything that you have exposures to do, and then on how to respond. So thermal burns, stop the burn, like we said, clear the area, remove jewelry, all good procedures to do. Running water on the thermal burn, and of course EMS for larger and deeper burns too. And then chemical burns, flush as much as you can. But like we talked about earlier with the SDS, making sure that's exactly what you're supposed to do for that chemical that you're working with. It's going to section 4, making sure you can do it immediately so you know if it is a flush or if it's just a leave on the skin and so forth. So, and of course, an electrical instance, de-energize first. Kind of walk through your, of course, lockout, tagout procedures, and then calling EMS to handle electrical burns when they're deeper and monitor. So we have a few resources that we will follow up with. I found some from OSHA as well as ones that we put together to kind of help you do a step-by-step walking through doing your hazard assessments, as well as other just good checklists to get tools to use in your resources. So that's everything I had. Any questions or concerns or any thoughts you guys have?
So far, excuse me, so far, oh, we have one. Will this be a recording we can as a tool later on for staff? Yes. So what will happen is, once this is done, we will download the recording and we will send a link out for you guys to have to our YouTube. And you guys can then use it as much as you want. You can share the link, and it's something that you will be able to have on your own. Anybody else?
And Therese, we're going to share those resources on the portal,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
So when we're done, this will also, under featured content, is the highest part of the resources of the portal. And in there will be a link to this video, as well as the resources, some CDC on burns, just some other information we found that you can have access to right there as well in your portal. And we leave it out there in that area until the next webinar, which is next month. And then we'll move it into like tip sheets area is typically where they end up. If we don't have any other questions, I have a couple of things to just let you guys know. When we end, you will actually end up with a little survey about the webinar. So feel free, if we would appreciate if you guys would fill that in. It gives us information about what you might want to see in the future and how you felt things went. Again, all of these will end up on our YouTube channel. We will send you a link so you'll have that. It will also be available on the rascompanies.com website under our events area. So we will make sure you have it in multiple ways. And also out on the events page as well as in the portal is the upcoming webinars for 2026. We always send a little email out that you can register, but you'll also be able to see the calendar for the coming year. And so we look forward to hearing from you about all of this and seeing you again. Again, we have LinkedIn, YouTube, and thank you for attending and being our partner in this. We really appreciate the time that you gave us today. And if there are other questions that you think of later, please feel free to reach out. We will get those directed to either your loss control consultant or to Susan, and we'll make sure that we do what we can to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.